that you have,
an audience.
they don't want to invest. They want you to do it. They want to know that they're going to invest in you and you've done it. That's why when I learned that, I was like, I'm going to do this myself. So build your platform. I work with an editor, yes. You have to have an editor.
Right.
And a spell checker, yeah. Everything's done. You're welcome. Yes.
What's your most fond memory of
Good question.
What's the question?
What's my most fun memory? Okay, so my grandmother wasn't fun.
Which one, Dora?
Fun? My grandmother wasn't exactly fun, but I think these are my cousins, Sarah and Leah. We all have memories of my grandmother that were very typical. Every time we walked into her house, she always had a green apple for us. That was just her thing. She had, let me cut you an apple, that was just her thing. It was just her thing. That wasn't the question. What was the most fun memory? So,
If you ask anybody,
yes.
their grandmother's best memory,
And what would they say? Was it fun?
The food.
not necessarily fun, like you said, she always had an apple for me.
Yeah, she always had a green apple. I mean, that was, her thing was, I want to feed.
Yes.
You know, that was fun.
Why?
If you have a fun memory of
Russian.
your grandmother, please let me know, because fun, it wasn't, and that's the other thing. The community back then and what I saw and what I see with my mother is, it really wasn't about being happy, and it really wasn't about, I want to be happy for myself. It was really about, we're here to build something for our family. And they did it. They put everything aside, and everything was about to build a community. We don't have that as much anymore. In New York, we're all very individual, but they kept it. And the reason why there was success with my family is because there was a mutual responsibility, which they couldn't make it without other people, and other people came here and they felt a responsibility to help everybody. We don't have that as much, but that was the big takeaway, because we all need each other. That was the big takeaway, is that we all need each other. If anybody would like to ask me questions, or any ideas, yes.
So first of all, I want to thank you for this wonderful book you wrote, and representing Bukharian women, Afghani Bukharian women.
Yes.
And then secondly, what struck me, even though we read a lot of Jewish books in
Yes.
the book club,
Yes.
specifically written by women, we're actually focusing on books written by women.
Okay.
There was this Sephardic, or rather Mizrahi, spin on things was very interesting. I, for example, never knew that you were identifiable by what you wear in Afghanistan, right? The blue, the blue chador versus the white chador for Muslim women. So it's like it's being vulnerable too, right?
Yes. So this is the other thing I think, and this is the other thing I learned. The Germans were in Afghanistan, and the reason why they were there, and because Afghanistan was a landlocked country, and the British were in India, and the way that to get to the British was through Afghanistan. So you read in the book that my mother there were no doctors in Afghanistan. That was the other thing. By the way, till today, girls are not allowed to get an education in Afghanistan. It's still very backward. But
Они вообще ничего не имеют, да.
there's no medical school.
Там не было
so
даже
there's no doctors.
госпиталя для женщин
There's
не
only
было.
foreign doctors. So my mother luckily had a German doctor take care of her. If you read through the book what happened to her, she had to have a German doctor take care, otherwise she would have died.
Yeah.
So you were saying?
So there were a lot of things about Afghanistan that I never knew, and actually Afghanistan, it seemed to me that women were worse off than in Russia.
Oh, so my grandmother, by the way, felt like her life went backwards.
Yes.
She left prison and she entered another prison now. When she left prison, now she was in another prison because my grandmother was from the golden era of Russia when she could get educated and she had a job. Now she's going to Afghanistan, she's all covered up, she's away from her family. It's very primitive. She was not used to it. She was a little bit more pristine. And I don't think she saw herself very close to the Afghan Jewish community. Yeah, I don't think she saw herself so close to the Afghan Jewish community. It was very primitive. It was, for her especially. She felt like she went backwards. Look, her second daughter was named Zipporah because she said, please let me fly away from here. So she was really not happy. Nobody was happy in Afghanistan in that way. It was much more backwards.
And what struck me, that women could not go to a hospital, right? Like, so their mortality, I suppose mortality for women was much higher because there was no access to medicine. So your book kind of took me to Kite Runner. Have you read it, right? Like,
Yeah.
I felt and
Yes.
enveloped in the backwards Afghanistan, which at some point was a good country, I think, right?
I think-
maybe never for women, but
For women, I can't say. I know that my aunts experienced, they had to, like my uncle had a Muslim name, which was very common. If you were Jewish, you had a Muslim name. And
Yeah.
Musa, exactly. And he, Agajon is another thing, exactly. Yes.
One of those things that were given to her.
Yeah, that was the other thing, is that there was a lot of conversos. I think a lot of people don't know that there was a lot of conversion. We are originally, by the way, not Bukharian. I don't know if you learned it from the book, but we are originally from Iran.
Yeah.
We originally from, and probably a lot of you here are originally from Iran. I trace back my ancestry, and we came from the first expulsion from the land of Israel, and then we ended up in the Greater Persian Empire, and we can trace back, I can trace back to the 1800s. That's when I can trace back myself. And then we moved. We went to a lot of the Bukharian Jews. They came from either Mashhad or from Yazd, which is two cities in Iran. But back to your point about Afghanistan, what I wanted to say about the Germans being in Afghanistan is my grandfather, I don't know if you knew him, his name was Chaim Abraham. He used to go to the shul. In 1940s, in Afghanistan, the Germans were there, and he said, and I know this because he wrote his journal, and I'm about to publish his journal, and he said that the Germans are in Afghanistan, and he was thinking to himself, we better get out of here. So he actually went and bought land in Israel in the 1940s, thinking to himself already that the Germans were already in Afghanistan, and knowing what was going on, that our time here in Afghanistan is limited. Eventually, we're gonna have to go. That's the other thing I found very interesting about the Jews from the area, is they knew when to go. They didn't overstay. You know,
Not
you look
always.
at European Jews,
Right?
and they were a
Not
little bit
always.
more in denial, a little bit reminding me sometimes about here, how we're a little bit in denial. Over there, and reading my mother's life, she was just going from country to country to country to country to country to country, and just moving forward. This is not normal the way that it is. And so for me, I thought that was very interesting. It's like at the drop of a hat, they're ready to go. I found that very interesting.
speaking of that,
Yes.
moving around the countries.
Yes.
And sorry, I'm dominating.
Go
the
ahead.
conversation. You guys can please think of questions.
Very
You're
good
next.
questions.
The question was, how did you feel when your mom left you at, I think, 10 years old and left to Thailand? Right? Like, I know. Was there got abandoned.
You remembered that part?
You all remember that part.
I read the book and then I said I have to go back and reread it because when I didn't know the characters, like they didn't, I wanted to reconnect with characters once I knew who they
I'm
were.
going to share with you something very important in relation to that. At the time, I didn't like it. However, I just want to add to that what you just said. First of all, I didn't realize until I was much older what my parents were doing in Bangkok, which is they built a Jewish community really from scratch. So they built something, and I came to understand, if my childhood was a little bit sacrificed for this bigger picture, it's okay. But it had to come to that at an older age. So I wasn't happy about it at the time, but as I got older and I got to see what they did, and maybe in some ways this book is like a healing, and putting the pieces together. And putting the pieces together kind of like to make sense of what the choices that they made, and going to Bangkok, and they did something incredible, and so, this is what I wanted to share, and I wrote it in the book. When my mother got married, okay, so my grandmother lost her father. If you read in the book, he was sent to the Gulag. He never saw him again. She was about 16 years old. So she wasn't raised with her father. It was something that was heavy in her heart. And then she got married to my grandfather, and my grandfather traveled a lot. That's why it's called Caravan of Hope, because how did they travel? They traveled in caravans. Their business was through these caravan cities called caravanserais. Caravan Sarai Market. Caravanserai. So, did I say
Caravan
Did I say
Sarai.
it right? I told you.
Now she said right.
I told you.
That's what Caravan Sarai.
That's what it is.
Huh?
Wait, let me finish. So, what happened is, my grandmother was not raised, my grandfather used to leave her for extended periods of time and travel. And then even when they moved to America, he would leave her for an extended period of time and travel. So she was not very happy. When my mother got married, she said, wherever your husband goes, you go.
That's right.
Yeah.
So she listened. She listened because for my grandmother, the importance was she felt she had no family anymore when she came out of Uzbekistan to Afghanistan, so she was holding on to her children. That's all she had. Whereas my mother had a lot more family, and she said, wherever your husband goes, you go. So that is the reason why my mother always traveled with my father. And but like I said, writing a book is a bit cathartic because you put the pieces together and it starts to make sense. And I understood her decision. So at the time though, I wasn't happy. But you know, history in your head changes as you get older.
Yeah.
It does.
Who has questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
Yeah, oh, yes.
If anyone
Sure.
today wanted to dig back, how do you do that?
So the way that I did it is you start with your family.
Right.
With your family, you're going to pull threads and you're going to start researching. So I had to understand the historical context of what was going on at the time that my mother was, I had to understand that. You have to start pulling threads.
So you went to the history, right? Because
I went to the
you can
history.
only go so far with your relatives.
Yes,
Then you lose those
Yes.
threads.
but don't forget, I also wrote this as a creative historical nonfiction. So the dialogue is creative. Yes, it's creative. So I went through some of the history, and then I tried to, and then imagining my mother and her sisters, and I fleshed out the characters as best as I could. So that's what, I did contact many professors, interestingly enough, all the professors that are all 90% of the professors of Central Asian Jews are not Jewish. I found that fascinating, and they're not in America. That was very fascinating. So I'm working with a couple of professors, Prague, Germany, what other country am I dealing with?
Moscow? No?
No, not Moscow. In Europe, yes, but that's what I found very interesting, that the professors that I got in touch with to help me with the historical context are not even Jewish. And I asked them, why are you interested in this history? And they said they're never bored. They find it fascinating, the stories. And they even speak Tajik, some of them, and they've gone to Uzbekistan, and they do tours, and they take people there. I found that very interesting. So yes.
I think you just answered my question, but this is a little bit on a different.
Go ahead.
No, when you and your family settled in America,
Yeah.
and you mentioned your parents sent you to an Ashkenazi yeshiva.
Yeah, which is around the corner from here.
What
No, it was Ashkenazi.
what sort of motivated your parents to build their own community, not to get absorbed into the larger Ashkenazi presence that is here, that is more successful and perhaps provides more opportunities for your children? So I'm curious about that. If you have any
Wait a
thoughts.
second. Ask me again, you're saying to me, why did my parents send me to that school?
No. I mean, you were obviously, you had no choice but to
Yes,
go to
yes.
Ashkenazi
Yes.
school, but you mentioned that your parents wanted to build their own
Community as
Bukharian
well.
community
So this is-
that's distinct from Ashkenazi community at
Bukharian
large.
Afghan community. So it was very interesting, and I think my parents were very different in this way in general. And I think it has a lot to do with them coming here in the 1950s, and there was no community.
Right, why didn't they feel like, okay, let's just get absorbed, to join the crowd,
they
absorb
did.
into larger Ashkenazi
They
community?
did.
They didn't do it
They
in
did.
any
They did,
kind.
and that's what they did. That's
Uh-huh.
where, and like my siblings and I all married out.
I see
They
this.
did, and I think that's where it was, I think that's where my parents were very different in general. They were always forward thinking and thinking, let's not just be here, let's also build out. So wherever they went, they built with people outside of their community as well, because that's the way that they just were. I think that's what set them apart really from a lot of other people, is that they were always looking, a lot of my mother's friends were American. And she was not intimidated. She felt like it's gonna make me grow because I'm starving. Staying in my community, I'm not growing. There was nobody here for her. She had you, and so, yeah, there was hardly, it's true.
It was just Ashkenaz or American, Italian, who was here?
That's really what it was, and she felt like, that was the other thing, and I think that's the reason, that was the other message I got in the book. She felt like she always wanted to grow and learn. I know my community, I know where I come from, I want fresh. And I think they were an adventurous couple, adventurous, and that's the other thing is, what the success of my family, I would say, is the fact that they were fearless and that they would go anywhere. Very adaptable. And I made a joke with Leah. Leah, raise your hand. I made a joke because Bukharian women have a way of they're not one profession people.
Nice.
They have backups.
Especially
They have backups. Bukharian women, you're a bookkeeper and a doctor, and you can. I mean, also, that's what I'm saying. Bukharian women are very, and it's probably a result of where you come from,
Yeah.
and that you don't feel this security, like because something can change like this. So let me have something else, and there's always a backup. And I would say my family was very adventurous, and they said, let's go out and let's explore. They were like Columbus, exploring. And that's the other thing that's very unique about this community as well, is that the Bukharian, and look how many came here, doctors, anesthesiologists, dentists, you came here, you made a life, and you're like, what a great country. We're gonna make the opportunity for ourselves. I mean, it's something to be very proud of.
How are they not afraid to travel to Thailand? What's there? There's nothing there. Like
There was nothing, when they were there,
But
there
they
was
walk
no
there,
dirt
they make
roads.
money, they can do it.
I know you said they want to build a community, but
No, they didn't go
went
there
for
to,
business.
they didn't go there to build a community.
there's no
That's-
Jews there. What
There were no Jews at the time, but when they
later.
went there, because that's the kind of people that they were, they heard, all they had to do was hear that there's gemstones there, and they said, and that's what they did, they went there, they ended up buying a building. This is the family business, they ended up buying a building, there was no Jews. And if you read through the books, how they built a Jewish community, and by the way, Chabad came to Bangkok because of my family. They built the roots.
Well, Chabad will go anywhere to make a Jewish community.
Now.
Now
Now they
There was
do.
no
My
Chabad.
family built the
Oh, they
mikveh
built the
for,
mikveh?
and then Chabad
Yeah.
went there.
Obviously
There was no
not.
Chabad at the time, and now
Yeah.
there's Chabad. There's 4 Chabads in Thailand, but at the time there was no Chabad, and it was because they built this Jewish community, and the Rebbe said, if you read the book, the Rebbe said, here's $5, go build a mikveh. And how many people do it? And they did, and it took 14 years. And the only reason why he asked them that is because he knew that he couldn't send shluchim until the mikveh was built. And then that's how the whole thing started.
I remember there's a mikveh there.
Yeah, and there is, it's called Mikveh Rachel. But the point even in that is, for all of you, no matter where you come from, look what you can accomplish. Really, that's the incredible thing. And I just want you to know, my mother, imagine, she's born in jail, no education in Afghanistan, diphtheria, at 28 years old. She's living in Forest Hills in a huge house. You think in her life she ever thought from the dirt roads of Afghanistan she'd be, and it just goes to show with will, and when there is a mutual responsibility for each other and you help. And she always said this. She said, God gave me this house so that I can share it. And this is the reason why there was always a flow, because you're gonna give, you can give because you're receiving. And this was the other message that I got from the book. Sorry to interrupt.
Anybody has questions?
Go ahead.
I have two questions. One is the one I asked before, how you come up with the name of the book, and one is the reason I want you to share right now. Considering like the kind of times we're living in now,
Yes.
it's pretty wild, scary times that we're living in now, and even we're in a free country that's, well,
Right.
you understand that? I don't
I
know how to
do.
put it into words. And so considering like the issue that you wrote about,
It empowers me even more.
how so?
It empowers me even more. I'm like, are you kidding me? This is, even when COVID happened, I was like, do you know how many millions of people died? Because I said I'm working on my grandfather's journal. Typhus in Central Asia? Central Asia was hit really hard with typhus. Millions died. Guys, we can do this. We're gonna get through this. We're gonna survive. So for me, and whatever is going on in the world right now, I focus on, we're here, we made it. We made it, and we need to celebrate. That's why I wanted to do the L'chaim, because we should celebrate what we've accomplished. Not focus on all of the challenges. It's always going to be challenging for us. It's always going to be. Accept it. It's just the way that it is. And you can choose to be scared, or you can, where do you want your focus to be? In the case of my parents, the focus was forward. Go forward. Don't look back. You're done with Afghanistan, you're done with Bukhara, you're done, really, you're done, and just look forward, and that's your only way out of this. And I think that's what we need to look at too.
But I also think that if we all stick together, there's a lot of self-hating Jews, for example.
Yes.
Oh, this one is more religious, this one is better, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So it happens to be that now everybody, a lot of people are not liking us, but if we're all sticking really together,
It's
united-
very interesting you say that, because if you think about it, our community had virtually zero assimilation, if you think about it. And I had to think about why we didn't have assimilation. With thousands of years in Europe, assimilation was happening way faster. The interesting thing is the fact that in Central Asia, the fact that we had to hide in our little mahallas, the fact that we had to hide in the chador, actually emboldened us, because we didn't go out. We didn't go out with the Muslims. We stuck together. And that was the message for us, that we better stick together, and that's our only way to survive. And that was the other thing that I came to understand in the story. How did we survive for thousands of years? Thousands of years. Here, 70 years already we're assimilating. You know, it's because we're comfortable. They were never comfortable. They accepted that they were not comfortable, and they never assimilated. They didn't go out and say, let me be friends with a Muslim. It was only, if they were friends with a Muslim, it was only for business. But a girl was never friends with a Muslim.
Yeah.
This never happened. So there's something to be said, because the fact that that we had to stick together and keep away from them protected us in the end. It saved us because we didn't assimilate. And the other thing I will share with you, I think it was in the book, my mother said to me growing up that everybody was Shomer Shabbat. There was no such thing as not Shomer Shabbat, where she grew up. She said to me that if somebody didn't keep Shabbat, maybe this was like this in Afghanistan, I'm not sure about Bukhara, because she grew up in Afghanistan, that the community fasted.
For 24 hours. It was in the book.
24 hours.
It was crazy.
If somebody broke Shabbat,
Yes.
if somebody broke Shabbat, the community, now you talk about mutual responsibility.
Yeah, that was
And
crazy.
seriousness.
I know.
Can you imagine now?
24
I mean,
hours.
today everybody would be dropping dead starving. It would be, but that shows the responsibility that everybody had for each other. That was the other, and all of those, I wrote this book, I have a 27-year-old son. I wrote this book, I want him to know where we come from. I want him to be strong. I don't want to raise a kid scared. You know, I want all of our children to be very proud where we come from and strong. And look what they went through. You can do this. And look what you rely on your family and community and build. Don't be selfish. It's not going to get you anywhere. The reason why we had success is exactly because we shared. That was the reason.
Can I ask a question? According to your last name, it looks like you married Ashkenazi person.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So you are raising your son, I guess, in the mixed culture.
Yeah, you mean between Ashkenazi and Sephardi?
Yeah.
When it's good for him, he's Ashkenazi. When it's bad, he's Sephardi.
On the Passover, he's Sephardi.
Passover?
He's Sephardi.
Sephardi.
That's what I'm saying, he's Sephardi.
But when it's good for him, it's that, so he's playing both sides. He's playing both sides.
Is that because how you told him it's okay to be either way?
I didn't tell him.
He doesn't just
You
have
don't
to
choose
take
the
your
truth.
man off, it's Ashkenazi.
100% Sephardi.
Oh, so
No, you married this. You married my culture. I'm not marrying your culture. No. So it just so happens that my husband likes my culture. I mean, seriously, we're an interesting bunch. We come from interesting, you know, where'd you come from? Shtibel and Lithuania. You know, just our story is very rich and very colorful. This is the other thing, is that this story of my mother and my grandmother, I felt needed to represent all the Bukharian women that didn't share their story, that couldn't share their story. You know, I have my great aunt, not Lisa, my great aunt, she died in childbirth, which was very common. Shura. She died in childbirth, which was very common. They had a lot of children. And I felt like, how many stories we don't know? I have another great aunt, she was married off at 12 years old. It's in the book. She was married off at 12 years old to a 40-year-old man who was married and had children. And it was not uncommon. But I want you to know why this happened. Jewish man. You know why it happened? It happened because there were so many times in periods in Russia that they confiscated the goods. 1 year it's good, depends who the emir is. You know, if the emir is liking you, or the emir is, and today he's liking you because you're good for the economics. Next year he's not liking you, you're not good for the economics. They would confiscate Jews, and then they were left destitute. So they had to marry their daughter off. It was really economics. So we think about it, and everybody looks at it and says it was disgusting, but they did it to protect. their children, also because this is the other thing. I don't remember if this is in the book, I'm not sure, but in Afghanistan, boys had to, Jewish boys, had to memorize the prayer to convert to Islam. They had to memorize that prayer because, and you had to say this, my father told me and he remembered it till the end of his days. This prayer that he had, this prayer in order I converted to save himself. And so they had to teach their children how to protect themselves from a very young age. And this is the other thing. I think in general that there was so much trauma, multi-generational trauma, that you're not even aware of it. Because it's just generational trauma. Sorry?
It becomes natural.
It becomes natural. I mean, you guys are tough. You come to America, you guys know what to do here. You know, everybody else is like, they're lost, you know, the immigrants are coming and they're like, where can I get a hotel room? I mean, you guys come here and you know how to set yourselves up. And it's just like you're very strong. It's something, that's what we need to be proud of. That's really what we need to be proud of. Yes. Oh, go ahead, sorry.
You ever went to
No, I'm planning a trip. You know, the Khanda boys? They're planning a trip to Uzbekistan, and I'm thinking, should I go with them?
You should.
They're so awesome.
I want to have a good time. No Hebrew?
Да, что
But
добро. Да, сейчас я на букву.
I know. Yes. I don't know. Anybody want to go speak in English?
Ну, она, наверное, сейчас это пампает. Я когда ходила, это
I'm in touch with Menashe. I am in touch with
Go with Handa when they go with the group from Israel. They all speak Hebrew.
Yes.
Я еще это, да, сделаю мясо, моя мама не менее принесла. А, вы тоже хотели? Ну, она хочет такие, которые моя мама покупает, такие она хочет.
There's no way. There's
Спасибо.
no way you can go to Afghanistan.
Хорошо, давайте я туда поеду.
And my parents had no
Да,
desire.
да, да.
They had no
Давай.
desire. No.
Мила.
If there's anything else I can share and impart with you, and yes,
So I do have one last question.
go ahead.
The India part was very interesting too for me because the split of India and Pakistan kind of felt a little like Israel and have you? I know Shmuel Abraham was
Yes.
in India. I used to work for him 25 or 30 years ago, if you remember me. I came to sign checks. But so I wanted to know a little bit more about India and whether you had a chance to travel to India.
I didn't go to India, but I can tell you that my parents have told me that India was the best time in their lives.
It seems like in the book.
They said it was the best time in their lives. And this is the other it's the British times, obviously. But I think you have to put into perspective. First of all, my father was head of Habonim, which is like you have Habonim, and then you have there was like a few different Bnei Brit. So he was head of Habonim. He loved living in India. And then my mother ended up being head of Hadassah in India also. And I think Bitso Hadassah. They loved living over there. But I didn't get a chance.
Did we speak English before we came to India? How did we speak? Did we know?
Oh, so my parents spoke Urdu.
Urdu. Oh.
They spoke Urdu.
Oh my God.
My father grew up.
Very good.
No.
Urdu is a Hindi.
No.
Pakistani.
No. They spoke Urdu. My father was living in India already from a very young age. He grew up, his childhood was, a lot of it was in India, and then my mother moved to India, and she loved don't forget India, the Bollywood. You know, she would love the dancing and
I
the
love the
culture.
picture of your mom in
With the dress, yes.
Your mom was beautiful.
Thank you. She was. She still looks good. She still looks good. But that's the thing, and I think that was the other thing that made her very different. Everywhere they went, they enjoyed. You know, they enjoyed. And if there's a message here, enjoy wherever you are. They were always looking to meet new people. And they didn't want to they knew for themselves, and this is where they were very similar. They knew for themselves, we want to expand ourselves. So they were always looking, that's why probably all of us married out. None of us married Bukhari and Afghani, none of us. And they were always looking to push yourself out, grow. You know your community, grow. I don't know if it's a good message for you guys.
They weren't afraid to assimilate, they were gonna assimilate people out.
Next generation.
Wasn't that a fear? Like
Yes.
for us, Bukhari,
Yes.
you're also Bukhari.
Yes.
But for us, it's like stay in the community. It's
Yes.
safer,
Yes.
stay within your own.
So don't forget,
circle.
my parents came here in the 50s.
There
There's
was
nobody
nobody
to
here.
stick with.
My parents came in the 70s.
In the 70s, it was
20
already
years
different.
drive, yeah, it's really
And you already had the Persians here in the 70s.
Yeah.
They were coming here. So when we came here, it was really just, I grew up, these are my cousins. We grew up very close to my cousins because that was their protection. So the way that we grew up, my mother's 7 sisters and 1 brother, everybody lived 5 blocks away from each other. Everybody. Today we can't do it. All of us are, that's the other thing.
No, I find it interesting that you said, go look out there,
She meant with the Jewish community.
With the Jewish community, yeah.
Okay, I thought you meant just
But-
go explore.
No. They were very adventurous in that way. They wanted to. They wanted to
это после
grow.
евреев не было
They
так
just wanted to grow, and I think that was part of their success. But they always had their foot in the right, very grounded. So for them, that was their way that they did it.
I was here one time.
Not push, but how she, very smart, that you found to really.
Oh, Matt, get with my mother?
Yeah.
Yes, the way that Toti, she arranged a party, like a bachelorette party. My father came from India and he was engaged to another woman, an Iraqi woman. And you know how it is, we don't know her. We don't know her. So she said, come to Israel. I'm going to introduce you to some women. She set like a pageant for her. I'm going to introduce you to some women. And he obliged and he said, okay, I'll come. Because he was a good son. He said, I'll come. And this woman in India is going around, I'm engaged. And she's Jewish. So all the girls that my grandmother brought to this bachelor party were ugly.
Yes, it's in the book.
Yeah, no, Rachel.
Yeah.
They were all ugly, but she made sure my mother, who was very pretty, you can see in the pictures, was very pretty. So obviously his eyes were going there. And then the story of how she damaged his car. And then her mother said, well, now you gotta marry him.
But she knew him at that point.
Yeah, sure. She did know him, but she didn't.
She lived in India, right?
Yeah, for a little while.
In Peshawar. My mother was 12 years old when she moved to Peshawar, which is today Pakistan, but then it was British India. So they speak, my father spoke Paki also. But so my mother lived in my father's home, but they were first cousins. But he looked at her like a little girl, and
Yeah.
she didn't look at him like, he was like a man. So there was no chemistry when they met in
Your grandmother
Israel.
already had this.
Yes.
She had an eye on her, and she was, let me show her how to sew. Let me show her how to cook.
That's very Bukhari.
She grew up.
So my grandmother was from Kharkiv. From Kharkiv. I don't know if you know, but my grandmother, supposedly he was famous, but my grandmother was Amin Kabuli's daughter. I don't know if you know, Amin Kabuli was this famous Rich, yes, of course. But he owned, in Samarkand, he owned the largest vineyard. And there's a big black marble tombstone for him. And the vineyard still exists. But it was confiscated by the Russians. And it became a different name today.
По-русски все это конфискуют.
I'm gonna go. I'll go. My son wants to go. I'll go.
Mom came and your grandmother came to Russia, to Uzbekistan?
Yes.
Yeah,
Two times.
Grandmother and your mother.
Yes.
Did you see that? Did you see
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
What surprised you the most as you were researching? What were your surprises?
There were some surprises, but they were very primitive surprises, like some of the surprises of how they took care of the diapering. And, yeah, I mean, that was weird. I mean,
Они завязывали там дырочку сделали.
yeah, and they tied the baby, I mean, like stuff like that.
Я это не, я помню, что мы это делали. Грудки стирали. Тогда нам
Wait, I have a question here. Somebody wants to ask a question.
So, where did it come from?
From Russian, probably.
No, not Russian.
Right, but
From Muslim, probably.
all the Uzbeks didn't have that tradition. So when this threading became popular here, I figured.
It was never popular here. It was popular there, not here.
When Indians started this business here, I figured, oh, it came from India.
No, my mother did threading, but I think the threading was in Israel. Wasn't the threading in Israel?
India, China, they
Not touching or touching?
But you know, the
Isn't that interesting? That's interesting. You're misbehaving. Well, that means because you want to be pretty for a man. And you shouldn't be thinking that.
Then they get married and they
Just in time.
This is for the religion, yes.
But they don't
It meant,
for men. Right. I remember my friend in Russia,
if she did it before,
so they wanted to set the time before the wedding a little bit earlier to do Koshchinah, because Koshchinah happens right before the wedding. Never understand that.
Она не так не видела, почему он делает. Это, мне кажется, идет микс.
right, because they don't want to be pretty.
Это все давно почистили. Да зачем надо было? Я помню, не делали, это был какой-то ужас. Здесь, в 93 году, в каком-то году. Это уже третий, есть разница. Уже 95-й ничего не делали. Я последняя была, которую не сделали. Они не решали брови, 19 лет бы что делали. У меня как Брежнев были брови. Вот как сейчас есть, так и будет. У меня были чистые. Я не делала цвета, кроме здесь. Я вообще вся белая. Nothing, no hair. Здесь у меня были толстые, как моего папы брови. Брежнев, честное слово.
In Bulgarian, I remember my grandmother, if you want to say somebody's pretty, and this was my grandmother, I don't know if this is it, she said safet. That's why, what a compliment.
Сапсифет.
What a compliment. She would would say things like Sefet Bakshevi. She would say things like that, or Jigar. She would say little words like that,
Потому что
but
от бабушки
generally
идет.
Hebrew. Yeah, generally Hebrew, I think. Hebrew, some. We have another question if anyone is interested to hear. You're running out of time?
Yes.
So let's do the following. We can have another 10 minutes to wrap up the questions. So if anybody has questions about the book, please, Vera.
Wrap it up fast. Rapid fire.
Let's take a picture with her so I can go. Can we take a picture?
And then we'll do a group.
If you look at the picture of the cover, which I designed, if you look, I designed this cover. If you look, it's a road, and what you see here is a city with a plane, which is really, and it's like, that's why I said it was like, because she traveled, my parents traveled, my mother traveled everywhere. And where is she going? She's going to the big city. And that's, where she's coming from, the dirt road. And I also chose these colors because, like I said, I didn't want the Bukharian colors, burgundy and gold. I didn't want those colors because I want this to appeal to many women. That's why I want, that's another thing also. That was pretty much it. Yes. I don't know whose book this is.
Это чей телефон? Элла. Алла.
Tamar, here's a question.
Лана, твой
Tamar.
телефон.
Hello.
Я вообще молчу. Я просто хочу книгу брать.
It's true.
Ты просто эту книгу потом дашь Диане, хорошо? А это моя книга, потом я... Ну хорошо. Давай, а ты же время же возьмешь.
So that's what I mean by ladies, you guys are really strong. And the way that she said, because my mother wanted to leave. This is the other thing. My mother is 16 years old and she says, I want to go to Israel. What does she know from Israel? This is the other thing that was very interesting, as opposed to here, what we see here, is the way that they dreamed about going to Israel and what they saw Israel was like the Wizard of Oz, that they're going to this place. And that was the part that was very interesting for me when I was researching, the way that they all felt about Israel, because here, and their dream is just to go to Israel. Here we don't feel it as much. The dream is to go to Israel and live there. But my grandfather didn't come for about 10 years, and she went because she said, we have to get out of Afghanistan. When you're desperate, you're willing to do anything. And that's really what it was. And she was just willing to do anything, and she was pregnant.
But he stayed back.
He did. He stayed back, and he had my aunt. I don't know if you know my aunt, the youngest one, Bracha. Bracha was born in Israel, and she didn't meet her father till she was 10 years old, and it was like, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. This is Bracha's daughter, right over here.
She left Afghanistan because she wanted to invent our
She was thinking that was the other. When you have a very strong look at.
Why did you think that?
Oh, to send money. To send pool.
That's what they know.
Yes, pool.
Israel, you couldn't make any money in Israel.
Yeah, they went.
had no food.
By the way, in Israel, that was the other thing I spoke about it. There was at that time the country was just absorbing. It was starting because of the Shoah. So many 1950s. There was no food.
I remember in school, it was 550,000 people, population.
Can you imagine? And today, 70 years later, we are 7 million, God bless us, Jews in Israel from that 550. But the will was we need to get out of Afghanistan. And it's so strong.
Something else.
It has to be very bad for you. There's no future. And that was pretty much it. You become fearless. For your children, you become fearless.
Right,
That's really what it is. And the truth is, it didn't come even from my grandmother. It came because of my mother. My mother said, I want to move to Israel. Her father said, okay, you can go by yourself. Who at 16 is saying from Afghanistan, I'm going to go by myself? And then my grandmother said, I'm going to. We're not separating this family because I have no family. I didn't see my mother. I didn't see my aunts and so many.
My mother, she was afraid that all the girls get married and not Jewish.
It
Then
is.
she said, in Afghanistan, she said, they're going, I'm going to take the kids and I'm going. My
For
father-
education, more for education.
And she was always looking to elevate her life also. That was the other thing.
She had the best time of her life.
How many
10
languages
years
do you
in
know?
Israel.
How many
When you stay in Afghanistan, how many languages do you use?
did they use?
No, in Afghanistan.
Only language.
Do you know how many languages? Because you're,
You have a Pashto
Yeah.
in speak Bukhari and Agash.
so two languages.
Farsi, yeah.
Pashto and Bukhari.
No Hebrew.
No Hebrew.
No Hebrew is Israel.
Only teacher for the boys, not for girls.
So no school, no nothing.
He went to go school, they was hitting us.
Yeah. Yeah, they were hitting.
He was taking up to the 16. Can I ask you a question?
Yes, and then we can wrap up, and I want to thank everybody for coming. Yes.
Thank you for coming. So when your parents traveled, you know how you said your grandma said make sure you always stick together?
Yes.
Don't ever travel separately?
Yes.
So where would they leave you and your siblings? Where would you go?
I grew up with nannies.
That's a fear.
I had good nannies, and I had, and also I had a lot of aunts and cousins around. I really did, and also I'm much younger than my siblings. Like I was the happy mistake, I think. I'm much younger, so my brothers, my sister is 16 years older, my brother 13, so they were older, so they felt more comfortable. It's always like, oh, we did this already, we're tired. That's what happens. So, I think, thank you for having Look where you came from. Thank you.
Would you be able to sign their books?
If anybody wants to buy a book, I brought 3 books. I don't have change. It's $12.
Can we get a signature for those who go?
Yes, I can do that. Oh my God. You can wait.
This and some books of more. This was part of the solution, which is
Awesome.